What do you do with a dead war game? When Pacific Rim Extinction launched, I missed the Kickstarter. That pushes me out to retail. And the retail was very slow to deploy. It was a very ambitious project, taking the Pacific Rim franchise and turning it not only into a tabletop game, but with miniatures, turning it into epic scale. So we're not talking about tiny little board game figures. We're talking about like toy action robot figures, heroic size figures with impressive detail. And then on top of it, pre-painted to a tabletop quality, to the point where if you took the model, threw on a light wash, and just did some highlighting, it looked beyond fantastic. I mean, literally popping out of the box, fantastic to play. It didn't quite deploy that way. Now, I bought into Wave 1 and the core. I was excited for this game. Mechs versus monsters, Jaegers versus kaiju, a chance to pilot and play in that narrative, to build some city terrain, to build some buildings intact and then build some buildings smashed, and really play that with, from what I saw, and certainly with playing Wave 1, some very, very interesting and innovative rules mechanics. What I liked about the rules was it acknowledged the fact that there's a duality with both these machines and these monsters. They're big. They do move slow and they're ponderous, but at the same time, they're moving fast and they have a lot of agility. Playing both of those aspects along with special powers and custom combinations and unique abilities for each model, it was a really fun game. And for a while there, it was my go-to game to bring to the gaming club because the rules you could pick up pretty quick. I mean, there was a couple of nuances there that over time you'd have to learn with Tactica, but you could pick up the rules pretty quick. But it played so well because someone would walk by the table and be like, Pacific Rim, or even if they don't know about Pacific Rim, they'd walk by the table and say, wait, giant robots versus like monsters? Like, I'm in. Smashing cities, I can smash the city and like do all that stuff. I'm in. So it was a great social game. Well, things kind of broke down. Wave 2 was released years later. Wave 3 never materialized. The beginning of Wave 2 released, but then the rest didn't. Then it eventually went to free release of the files to print and play if you wanted to get them 3D printed, but then you'd have to paint them up. Now, okay, I could paint them up, but the cards weren't released in the same card format. They weren't released at all. And even the 3D print models, they weren't developed well enough to go together efficiently. It felt like, from one of them that a friend had, it felt like I was building the old Warhammer 40,000 Nurgle Demon Prince. This was a metal model that it was so heavy you could wrap it up in a blanket and use it as a flail or a morning star. This model was so heavy you would pin the arms. You had to pin the arms and the head and the torso. Didn't matter how you pinned it. Did not go together. Did not stay together. It was just nuts. I mean, it's like a decade plus later, and the model still falls apart for random reasons. I even tried magnetizing it. It's just absolutely crazy. It reached a point where I'm like, this thing is not going to win. I'm going to get this model to go together. That's how this second wave felt, and of course, third wave not materializing. So here we are with a game that is certainly playable, and I enjoy it. I've got Wave 1. I have two or three of the models for Wave 2. Missed out on some of those iconic Jaegers that I was really interested in, but it's dead on arrival. On top of that, it's a very focused game, no future development, and the diversity of units with Wave 1 and Wave 2, there's not enough on the table to continually experiment with and play. Now, certainly one could get into homebrew. Certainly one could tap into the community. Just because a game goes extinct doesn't mean it's necessarily dead. But what we look at is two things with a dead game or an extinct game. Pacific Rim Extinction, ironically. The first is, what are the rules like? what is the rule system like? Is it an open or closed system? What I define by that as examples would be Warhammer 40,000 is a closed system. X-Wing Miniatures is a closed system. The units are well defined. You could make up your own stuff, but there's no creation toolkit. There's no effective way to do that, let alone checks or balances. Then, of course, you need the miniatures for it. Something like BattleTech is an open system. There are mech creation, vehicle creation rules. You could literally create all your own stuff, completely playable, completely tabletop legal, print up your own models. Another example would be Hero Quest. I know it's a board game, but it's a great example of an open rule set in that you can make up your own quests. You can create your own monsters. You can add miniatures to it. So that's the first kind of section going in, looking and saying, is this game, can I homebrew this? Can I expand my own content? Can I print and play stuff? Can I create new scenarios? Or is it a closed system? Pacific Rim, extremely closed system. They focused on the Jaegers and the Kaiju from the movies. You could build your own outside of that, but the powers and the scale, you'd have to kind of make stuff up literally as you go. And how would that play? Then you get into this idea of investing time in that. Could I be investing time in another rule set? So it's a closed rule set. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but then it leads into the second point of trying to figure out what we're going to do with a dead system. In exploring it, what is the diversity of units and models? So I'm just going to pull in a current war game. Let's just say BattleTech just went extinct. It was not supported anymore. No new stuff being produced, no new stuff coming out. There are so many mechs out there, so many different mechs that you can play. Actually, a better example. Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy, not Age of Sigmar, not 40K, not the reboot that they keep on saying we're going to get with the old world. Warhammer Fantasy. The rules, the armies, the books, the models, you could be playing Warhammer Fantasy, and I'm sure there's communities out there that would be playing forever. Another example, X-Wing Miniatures 1.0. There's enough ships out there, factions, that you collect them, you play them, you have such a diversity of lists, of scenarios. It has that big pool. Pacific Rim Extinction does not have that. So if you have a game that the pool is very, very small and the rule set is closed, you're kind of resigned to the same thing over and over and over again. It's going to limit its playability. So now we kind of look, this is kind of the decision-making point. Depending on the game, is it something that you offload and maybe you take a loss, or if the game just went extinct, meaning it's not supported, no more production, there is a window there of time when a game goes extinct where the current player base, there's always going to be people that enjoy various systems. They're looking to complete their collection, double up on their collection, enhance their collection before it goes completely extinct. That's kind of the time to offload your stuff. At the end of X-Wing Miniatures 1.0, it was interesting because here in New York there was, and still is to some extent, a massive X-Wing community. When Fantasy Flight announced that 1.0 is done and buried and dead, I was surprised to see the spike in people buying stock, in players buying collections. A lot of players, just competitive players, were saying, look, okay, we're done, it's out, I'm selling my stuff. You had players like myself and other players who said, well, this is my chance to get like 50 TIE fighters, because at some point maybe I want to throw down 50. I finished at 68, right? To really complete your collection. So there's that brief window where if you're going to liquidate, if you're going to get out, now's the time. The secondary option, and where I've went with Pacific Rim, because I like the rule set, I love the movies, to really try to evolve it into a game that you bring out and play once in a while. I've got 3D printed cities, buildings, little cars. I've got the wrecked rubble. I can throw down a pretty interesting game. Is this something that we're going to play every week? No. Is it something that I would bring to a kind of a local convention if someone asked me to stock a table and play a table? Yes. It fits that. It works with that. It plays with that. It's a great game for that. So one of those types of systems, war games, turns into this. You had high hopes. You'd hope to be regularly playing it. It's now going to kind of be a secondary play under certain circumstances. Now, that also leads to other systems that are dead, but for whatever reason have a kind of unique fan base. And that fan base might be local or it might be community-wide. Mordheim. I've got multiple war bands. If I'm usually playing, it's Dwarven Treasure Hunters for the Weird Stone bonuses, or I'm playing Chaos. I'm playing the Possessed, the chance to play those miniatures. We have a pretty big community here of about 8 or 9 players that 4 times a year we get together. Like you get that text or you get that email, the town crier, new Weirdstone has been discovered in the city of the damned. Are you ready? And we set that up in advance and we make it an entire day of playing. It's a pretty kind of epic event. And of course, some new players drop in every now and then and we support that. So taking a dead system, Mordheim's been dead for years. Cursed City was kind of the somewhat Quest re-implementation of that. Playing it from that perspective, does it turn into something where you can turn it into an event? You can get that enjoyment as an event. Those are kind of the decisions, because the last thing that we want is to just have it sitting in a box somewhere and hanging out. But when is a dead system, and how do we utilize it?